Jeepers.
Welcome to a meeting of the Finance Committee of the Brockton City Council for April 5th, 2021. This meeting is being held in accordance with Governor Charlie Baker's signed open meeting law dated March 12th, 2020, which relieves a public body from the requirements of Section 20 of Chapter 30A that it conduct its meetings in a public place that is physically open and accessible to the public, provided that the public body makes provision to ensure public access to the deliberations of the public body for interested members of the public through adequate alternative means. The Finance Committee members, staff, and certain invited guests with matters on the agenda will attend the meeting in person in council chambers as we are here now. Out of respect for public health and in response to the governor's declared state of emergency, this meeting will be closed to the public, and interested parties can instead access the deliberations via a live stream on the Brockton YouTube on the Brockton Channels Live. Welcome back, councilors. It was almost strange to walk in here, but it's nice to be back. Madam Clerk, we are going to have special councilor recognition. It is on the agenda. Councilors, if there's no objection, Mr. Plouffe and Mr. Santos, who is calling in remote, is going to give you an update on enhancements to our audio, video, and technology here in the council chamber. This is a project that was begun literally years ago when Councilor Ian Erie was president, Councilor Azak was president, but it's something that I think is really important for our public to be able to hear what goes on, understand what we're doing, understand what we're saying, and I'm very indebted to Mr. Plouffe and Mr. Santos for their work. So I don't know which one of you wants to start, Mr. Plouffe, but why don't I defer to you?
Certainly. So Mr. Santos is on the phone, correct?
Yep.
Great. We had discussed a couple different improvements to this chamber here to give the ability for remote access to your meetings via Zoom and also through the YouTube channel. I guess right now the two systems are kind of incompatible, talking to BCA. So one of the things that Mr. Santos did is he went out and got a quote for some software that will allow us to stream from here on and YouTube and combine the two together in a computer in the BCA box. They'll take all the sound from each of your microphones and put it into the system. It'll allow you to have basically the Brady Bunch view of everybody that's on Zoom, zoomed into their face, and then also be able to have them individually when they speak show up by themselves. One of the technicalities that we have here is that you would not be able to see, unless we put a TV in the middle of the room, the people that are on Zoom. So one of the things we talked about was getting an individual monitor for each counselor at their seat attached to their desk. And that would allow them to move the monitor up and down, see what's on the system. It would be viewing only. The sound would still come out of the speakers and the microphones as they are right now. For the gallery, to be able to see that process also, we've been discussing a bunch of different ways to provide a TV or a monitor behind the counselors for the gallery to be able to look at them. We're thinking maybe in the corners, maybe a TV stand that's a little bit above the plexiglass dividers, something of that sort. Nothing has been definitively determined because we're trying to find a bunch of different avenues. Another thought we had was a possible projector on top of one of these angle irons that's on the columns that would project to the wall. But we have to take a look at the projectors and see if that would actually work. So, Bill, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Go ahead, Mr. Santos.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't hear much of what Mr. Plouffe said, so I'll just tell you from my standpoint the two pieces of the project. And one of them was to create a hybrid meeting environment to include the Zoom, Teams, GoToMeeting, YouTube, and the live broadcast all in one. These are, right now, obviously I'm on the phone because we don't have that feature, but to be in a production environment and to feed it out live through the broadcast as well as Zoom, you need to integrate these systems, and that's what we intend to do. That's what the equipment that was quoted would do for us. Part of that, a second piece of that would be that the AV would include wireless mics, monitors. There would be fold-down monitors at the council stations, a wireless presentation area, monitors on the side of the audience, and these things would enhance both the YouTube and the entire hybrid meeting environment. So I think that it's well overdue, you know, and based on how I have to join the meeting tonight, kind of proves that. So I apologize. I did not hear anything that Mr. Pliff said, so I don't know if I repeated what his comments were.
Mr. Santos, we talked about having the individual monitors at a counselor's desk fold up in a way if they needed desk space so that they could see PowerPoint presentations instead of having to look left and right and trying to see them off of a screen, and then having monitors set up perhaps behind where the counselors sit so that those in the gallery would be able to clearly see and understand what was going on. I had not gotten into yet, having Mr. Pliff mention the concept of having an elongated table, still having the podium in case it's needed, but having an elongated table with wireless mics so that when we do budget hearings, we have a number of people come before us, they'd be able to have a place to spread out their materials, sit down, present the information to us, and not having people stand around, and then when someone steps away for some reason to show us something on a PowerPoint presentation, their voice doesn't get picked up by BCA and people can't hear what's going on. So this is in its preliminary stage. Mr. Clarkson has done some research on reimbursable expenses from the CARES Act, and he's here this evening. But I wanted all of you to know that the project that was begun, we're going to push it, because it's not really for us, it's for our residents. So anyone who has any input, any suggestions, any ideas, please get in touch with Mr. Santos or Mr. Pliff, because you know, all of you may think of something that we haven't. The other thing that Mr. Santos mentioned was having an electronic board outside the council chamber with information such as masks required, maintain social distancing, and then when we don't use it down here, it could go down towards the GAR room and be used for meetings that are held down there. And then finally, perhaps you could mention the shades that were discussed because of the time of year when we have an impact from the sun.
Absolutely, Mr. President. That, knowing firsthand when we were doing our ZBA meetings, I know that when we present our Zoom meetings from this location, the sun comes in through the light, through the windows, and blinds everybody. All you see is a shadow. So we have contacted a local company here to provide us with a quote to receive new blinds for all 5 of these facing windows. We're going to look at just regular blinds, but also look at some automated ones. Automated ones are going to be a little bit more expensive, but and that's going to be regular budgetary items, not a COVID reimbursable, unfortunately.
Councilors, questions, comments? Anything?
I would.
Councilor Nicastro?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pliff and Mr. Santos. I felt terrible during our budget hearing meetings last summer. We were all trying so hard, and because of the technical difficulties, constituents and residents accused us of, you know, not being forthright and stuff, and we were literally having technical difficulties that a building of this stature, a city like ours, should not be experiencing. So I support this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? I should mention Councilor Monahan is, he is participating remotely. He is on this call, and I verified his voice. I know it's him, for those who may think that it isn't. If there's nothing else, Mr. Pliff, Mr. Santos, thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I could just add one more
You're
thing.
welcome.
Yeah, Mr. Pliff?
Just to give the councilors and the public an idea about this building, We're talking an 1890s building, not built for what we use it now. And so the technical difficulties that we have in construction present themselves everywhere. And one of the thoughts we had originally was placing TVs on the wall high up. And unfortunately, we have, through my shops people, we've evaluated the idea that they say drilling through these walls is very difficult, and they wouldn't allow, the walls don't really allow for much weight to be hanging on them. So I know we discussed TVs on the walls to accomplish our goal, but it's a little bit more of a technical difficulty because of the age of the building. I just want to mention that.
Well, thank you very much for your ongoing work, and
Mr. Chairman,
councilors that, yes.
right here. No, over this way.
Oh, Councilor
Do
Ianieri.
you recognize me? Okay, I just wanted to make
It's
sure.
been so long, Councilor Ianieri, through the plexiglass.
Thank you, thank you. The one most important thing I do want to mention, please get it done, because in 2018, when I was trying to work on this, even with the late Mayor Carpenter, we were trying to work on this, and we had one heck of a time, we really did, between what we were trying to do here, and of course, the elevator was down at that time, made it very difficult, because we were on route for meetings, and, it just didn't work out, and then the completion was never the correct way. I'm not gonna mention names and people, but it could have and should have been done the right way, and it never was. So this is well overdue, well overdue. So I like the way we're hearing things this evening and what your outlook is, and hopefully maybe by the end of the year we'll be there, do we think, or at least sooner, or?
I believe the quote has been submitted and they're on a state bid list. So as soon as we activate or give them notice to proceed, they can come in and start. I believe we're talking a month or two.
Great. Don't let us interrupt, even though we're the city council. The council president can make the decisions for us. That's his duty to do. But just keep it going, because it's definitely well worth what today's society is all about. Let's face it. And when this building's not there on things like this, we're not. But thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
You're welcome, Councilor. The target date is before budget hearings. That's the target date.
That's
so.
great.
Councilor Monahan, anything from you?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Plouffe. Thank you, Mr. Santos.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Clerk, item number 1.
Of Manuel Centillo of 29 Kenneth Ave, Brockton, to the Brockton Community Cable Television Board for a 3-year term ending March 2024. Invited, Manuel Centillo.
Welcome, Mr. Centillo.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your willingness to serve. Any questions for Councilor Azak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Centillo. How are you?
Good evening, Councilor.
You already serve on the board, correct?
Correct.
This is a
It's a reappointment.
reappointment. I also would like to thank you for your service on the board. And unless any other councils have any questions, I motion to recommend this favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
On the motion,
Motion made and seconded properly on the motion, Councilor Nacastro.
thank you. Good evening, Mr. Centeno, nice to see you. I just had a few questions for you. I was wondering, how many years have you served on the Cable Access Board?
Just about 7 years.
7 years, okay. So they're 3-year terms, so you're going into your 3rd term,
Correct.
if everything goes well
Yes.
tonight. Okay. And I was wondering about the plans for cable access. There's been a lot of change there in the last year and a half.
Correct. There's been a lot of changes.
Yes, can you just give me a brief?
Yep. We've done a lot of great things. I don't know if you guys have been there recently in the past year or so. The young kids are doing a great job. I know you're probably asking about the general manager. It was a mutual agreement. We separated. We're in the process of appointing a new general manager in the upcoming, so you guys will know shortly. But overall, I think it's been great. We've done a lot of amazing changes, from the upgrades on the TV channels. If you go on now and watch those channels, they're like in HD now, which we didn't have in the past. So those are all the changes that we're making: video quality, the audio quality, and I think you walk into the BCA now, as a board member and as just a regular person going in on Fridays, to help out with shows, you can see the difference. The building feels cleaner, the building feels open, and it feels more inviting for people. That wasn't like that in the past.
That's great. And since you mentioned about the executive director, have you been searching for someone? Did you advertise? And
Yes, we advertised, we had a few candidates. As a board, we brought it down to the final 3, then we interviewed again a whole bunch of times. We're close to making our decision. We haven't offered anything yet, so that's why I can't say any candidates. And hopefully you guys will hear it shortly.
That would be wonderful, and if you'd like, I'm happy to sponsor a resolve to bring your new executive director in front of the council to introduce the person and talk about his or her plans.
That'd be great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you,
problem.
Mr. Chair.
Anyone else on the motion, councilors? If not, would the clerk call the roll, please, for a favorable recommendation?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianieri?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
So that's 10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably, Mr. Centillo. It'll be voted on this coming Monday. You don't have to be here, but the council will formally confirm your reappointment.
Thank you, councilors.
Thanks again very much.
You guys have a good night.
Thank you. Item number 2, Madam Clerk.
Of John McGarry of 68 Cambo Street, Brockton, to the License Commission as an alternate for 3 years, for a 3-year term ending March 2024. Invited John McGarry.
Certainly.
Good evening, Mr. McGarry.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
I have 3 words for you. Glutton for punishment with all of your years of service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Well, she's a great city, and I want to do my part to keep it going in the right direction. So this is a quality of life commission, and I think it can do some great things and help keep the city moving in the right direction.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion
On the
made and
motion?
seconded. Any discussion?
On the motion,
On the motion, Councilor Ianieri.
I just want to ask, is this what the retirement of Ward 3 councilors do, is just come back and, okay, I just want to make sure.
Like the bad seed, Council.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Councilor Lally, did you have your hand up, or?
I was pointing to Councilor Ianieri.
Oh, thank you. All right, no further discussion. Would the clerk call the roll for a favorable recommendation?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianieri?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. John, it'll come up Monday evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, councilors.
Thank
Stay
you.
healthy.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, item number 3.
Ordered, acceptance and expenditure of donated funds from the Cape Verdean Association to be used towards the purchase of a new canine and equipment as needed for the Brockton Police Department in the amount of $1,000. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, and a representative from the Cape Verdean Association.
Welcome, Chief. Welcome, Mr. Clarkson. Councilor Rodriguez, are you going to represent the Cape Verdean Association?
Well, I don't know about representing the Cape Verdean Association, but I wanted to say something to the chief if he came to the podium.
All right. Chief Gomes, would you come up first, please? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Councilor Rodriguez.
May I? Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to publicly thank the police chief for his willingness to, and this has nothing to do with the fact that the resolve is here or the order is here in terms of the donation to the police department. We basically felt that it was within our resources. I mean, we don't have a great deal of resources at the association, but we felt that it was something that was much needed in the police department, and it also sends a message that the community looks favorably of the work that the police department does for our community. Often you hear just the negative sides of policing in the sense, but we felt that it was important for a community organization of magnitude of the association to step forward and actually kind of contribute to the to the police department. Although in a small amount, but at least it's the thought that counts, basically. But I also want to take a moment or so just to thank the police chief. About a week or so ago, as you may know, March is the Women's Month, and the world basically celebrates Women's Month on the 8th of March. But in Cape Verde is the 27th of March, and we had a wonderful event sponsored by the ladies that are actually part of the association. Just to give you an idea, the program has been viewed on Facebook over 8,700 plus times. It has reached around 16,000 individuals that actually have seen this program, and it was a great program that was attended by 50 women from our communities. But the important concept was that it was basically a panel to discuss women's issues here in the city. And we had a panelist that consisted of just a few people in terms of folks that actually presented. But we had the president of the Cape Verde Nurses Association that came out and basically did a wonderful job in explaining her job and some of the difficulties that some women, especially minority women, feel and are basically labeled as before they get to a certain level. I mean, this is a young lady that came from Cape Verde or Portugal and went through the Brockton school system, graduated, went on to college, has now a master's degree in nursing, has an important position within Mass General in the sense, and she leads this organization. But we also had asked the police chief to provide us with a female Cape Verdean officer, and the chief basically did not hesitate to send somebody, and we had the officer DeAndrade, who was, I had known about her, but didn't have an opportunity to talk to her. But let me tell you something, she has some fans now in the community. She did such a great job with the women who were present, provided her phone number to every single lady that was there, some of whom did not speak a lick of English. And she has some fans in our community, as I said. So I wanted to publicly just come out and thank you for your willingness to do that. It's not often that we hear some positive things about the police, especially within the minority community, but I wanted to make sure that, it's said publicly that she was, she's worth the funds that we spent on her. She was a great person, easy to deal with and talk to, and I think she has now some, like I said, quite a few fans. So I just wanted to publicly thank you and thank her for the work that was done just about a week or so ago in the name of that community. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Counselor. Anyone else? Counselor Nicastro.
Good evening, Chief. Thanks so much for being here. I just wondered, what does a canine trained dog cost
Well, they
to
come
acquire?
That's a good question because they come in different levels of training, and they come in different levels of certification, and they also have different abilities. The dogs that we've had, the ones that we invest most in, they're tracking dogs, and they're primarily used for tracking, but they're our first line of defense when time is of urgency with Alzheimer patients and missing children. The dogs are usually the go-to thing, and we have them on a 24-hour basis. So in order to do that and bring them into police service, you get a dog that's already trained and certified, and then the dog goes to an additional academy of several weeks with his handler. So you understand those dogs will range anywhere from $7,000 to $20,000 a dog, depending on training.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? If
Motion
not-
to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Okay, motion made, seconded, recommend favorably. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally? Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
So it's 9 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. Mr. Clarkson, you and Chief Gomes are, along with Miss St. James, are up for about the next 4 or 5, so if you could come back to the podium. And Madam Clerk, would you call number 4, please?
Ordered, acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $50,000 from an anonymous donor to the City of Brockton Police Department. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, and Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police.
Chief Gomes, I suspect they'll want to start off with you. Questions for the chief as to how the money would be used if accepted? Councilor Cardoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
So my question is, we've had some discussions on the council around anonymous donors.
Yes.
So can you explain to us why we're receiving such a large amount of money from an anonymous donor?
Well, I'd be happy to. Just because it's anonymous doesn't mean we don't know who it is. This particular family runs pretty much a foundation. They're very big supporters of police services, namely canines. We gained their attention last year when a Brockton police canine saved a small child that was near death in the woods, almost frozen to death. A Brockton canine found that kid, saved his life. Through that notoriety, we were contacted, and a donation came from that. The reason why I tell you about that past story is that the $50,000 that's before you tonight buttresses $46,000 from the same organization last year. They were very happy that we kept our word, and we purchased a dog, and we got everything going. We send them updates on the dog and what we're having. Now, if you also know that in the last couple of months, the Brockton Police Department, we lost Ubi. These dogs have names, and they're part of the family. And we struggled real hard with that. And they were aware of that. And they contacted us, and they asked us if we would be willing to take another donation to replace that dog and everything that goes with it. And I appreciate the question that was asked, because I want to make it clear that any of these donations, they go exclusively to the dog, their training, their equipment, their food, their health care. None of this money goes to overtime or anything like that. That is strictly a budgetary item that I take care of through payroll. That's something totally separate. These donations go 100% to the canine unit. Fast forward, this is the second donation from the same organization, from the same family. This is not unique to Brockton. They have been large donators to other major cities, namely Boston. The reason that they want their name kept out is because quite frankly, they don't want to be approached by everyone for a donation. And they would like to donate to the things that they're interested in, they're passionate about, and police service animals are one of them.
So that we accepted a donation from them, you said, in the past?
Yes,
And was it anonymous at that time?
It was anonymous. There's a name, there was a cover letter with this. There's actually an attorney that represents them. They just don't want their name to be out publicly. But if it's a situation that if it's critical to you, I can provide you with some information without it being in a public forum for that. And that's at their request.
I'd like to have that information, if you don't mind.
I can get you that, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. No other questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, we talked earlier about this, and you said something that stuck out. It's anonymous here, but the name is on the check.
Yeah.
It's not...
This is through a check, through the law office that represents this family.
Yeah.
The donators, there is nothing secretive about it. They just request, part of the request is that their name is not put out publicly.
Yeah, and that behooves us in the sense that, the less municipalities asking them for donations, the more we can ask them for donations. No, but I appreciate, you answered a lot of my questions earlier, so I just wanted to note that. And I was going to say, this is something we can ask you offline as well, but in the interest of preventing the party from being inundated by other municipalities, this is why they've asked us to be anonymous.
Yes.
I appreciate that, and if nobody else has anything, I would move that we recommend this favorably. Oh, Councilor Thompson, I think. Never mind, I withdraw my motion.
All right, actually, Councilor Azak and then Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. And I would just like to say I would like to thank this anonymous donor publicly because donations are really welcome here, whether they're Brockton residents or if they're from outside of the city. On our order that came through, it did state that this will be used to purchase 2 new canines, a cruiser, and equipment. So is a cruiser, will that fit into this?
Yes. We have one car right now. This car kind of is there in the wings if we do go with a second. There are also some other donations, as
Correct, yeah.
Council stated. And by the way, I didn't get a chance to address that, but thank you, and please thank them on my behalf. No donation is too small. There's a lot of care that goes into these animals, but when we need them, they're worth every penny. And if you don't believe it, you can ask the family of that young kid we saved last year, and Alzheimer's patients and little kids that they're useful, a great deal. So, thank you for that, and I will pass that on, by the way.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's good to see you again, Chief. And I too wanted to thank this anonymous donor for their generous support to our city police department. Councilor Azak basically touched upon my question regarding the cruiser and the additional equipment. So that question was asked and answered. So thank you, thank you, Chief.
Move
And
to
thank you,
recommend
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made, properly seconded to recommend favorably. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
On the motion?
On the motion,
Too late?
Councilor Cardoza.
Chief, can you provide that information that I requested before our next city council meeting?
I can provide that to you tomorrow morning.
Okay, that sounds
I can
good.
reach out to you. I'll
Yeah,
out
because
to you
this is all I got, and so there's not much information on here,
Well,
so.
I apologize. I'll take responsibility for that. There was a cover letter that came with the check from the law office with the specifics on it.
Yeah, because, this is all good, and we appreciate the donation, but for full transparency,
Absolutely.
given the climate that we're in, we should be, more transparent.
I'll take care of that first thing in the morning.
Okay, thank you very much.
Actually, Chief, the chair, just for the record, has a question. We don't tell the patrol officers who's donating the money, correct?
No,
In
sir.
other words, we don't post a notice.
Right.
No, sir. No,
Okay.
No, we do not, and this is also at their request, once again. But people inside the police department don't have that information.
Right.
Thank you. All right, would the clerk call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianieri?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nacastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson? 10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. Item number 5, please.
Ordered, acceptance and expenditure of the total grant award in the amount of $5,000 from the National Crime Victims' Rights Week Community Awareness Project Sub-Grant Award to the City of Brockton Police Department National Crime Victims' Rights Week Community Awareness Project Sub-Grant Award Fund. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, Michelle St. James, Brockton Police Department Grant Specialist.
All right, Ms. St. James, would you join the chief and Mr. Clarkson? Do you want to present an overview or comment?
This grant, we have a victim assistance grant from the Office for Victims of Crime. And when you have that grant, sometimes they offer other opportunities. And in this case, they have National Crime Victims' Rights Week, which is the 18th through the 24th of this month. And you had to present how you might make people in your community more aware of the rights of crime victims. Because of COVID, we went with a virtual platform. We're going to be doing videos on Facebook with the mayor, with the chief, with our victim assistance unit. And so this is just a good way for us to get out the word. We're also going to be giving away reusable shopping bags at various places throughout the city that have brochures about our victim assistance programs, so just so that crime victims can know that there is help available at the police department and other places in the city, because the brochures also have other resources listed on them.
Questions, councilors? Councilor Cardoza?
Hello, Ms. St. James, how you doing?
Good, thank you,
Good.
Councilor.
So I would hope that the bags would have information in different languages as well? Is that
We're working
something?
on that. We're trying to find a better company than the one we used last time that kind of screwed up a brochure of ours, so yes.
Okay, that would be
working on
great.
that.
That's a great idea. And then with the victims' rights folks, do we have anyone that speaks other languages there yet? Because we're
Not-
having a tough time with
Not
domestic
currently.
violence
When
victims.
we interviewed people, there was not one who was bilingual, unfortunately. So yes, that is a difficult thing in the city. And I've talked to some of
Yeah.
our resource partners, and everyone's having a rough time of it.
Very rough time, and I think we need to increase capacity, and I think we need to increase these salaries for these folks so that we don't lose them to Boston, because there's tons of Cape Verdean Spanish-speaking people, but they all go to Boston because they pay more.
I would agree. Unfortunately, with this grant, we're stuck with what they gave us for salary. So
I get you. I'm
Yeah.
just frustrated in general.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Believe me, I wish there were ways we could do it. I was actually talking to Family and Community Resources. They had a tough time too. They put
Yeah.
out, and they just couldn't get anyone who was multilingual. It is difficult.
Very tough. But thank you for your good work. Thank you.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know, maybe I'm living in a different city or something, because I hear this stuff being said constantly in terms of not able to find individuals to do these kinds of work. If you want me to, by the time we leave here tonight, I can get you a qualified person to do this kind of work. I don't quite understand, perhaps is where you guys are looking for, or where you're looking for these individuals to come from, because they are out there, out in the community. I see it all the time. I see these young people looking for jobs everywhere, and for some odd reason, it's either we're not advertising in the right places or we're not talking to the right people. Because frankly, I hear from the school department, I hear from all these departments saying we can't find qualified individuals, we can't find qualified individuals. When you look in a city like Brockton, we've got 100,000 plus people. What it said, somewhere around half of the population comes from a home where English is spoken as a second language. So you're looking at 50,000 people, and to be honest with you, it's kind of hard to believe that we can't find individuals to do this kind of work where, at least from the association standpoint, I see this stuff every day, people looking for work, people qualified looking for work. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about is the fact that recently, I think we're spending way too much time putting all our eggs in the virtual basket, in the sense that we are forgetting about the usual, the so-called the way of doing things that we've done it in the past. We've got a large church at Edith Stein where we just had services for Easter Sunday. We had 300 to 400 people there. And that happens on a regular basis, even with COVID. But for some odd reason, it seems like we've gone from 8 to 80 all at once and forgotten how to go about doing these little things. I mentioned it the last time that you were on Zoom with us, that we are at the association, we've got all these programs doing virtual everything. We ran a summer program with over 100 kids. Socially distanced. No one got sick. There were masks everywhere. We had police officers there helping us out, a variety of other things in the community. And we ran those programs almost like nothing ever happened in terms of COVID. But it seems that we have gone from doing the old-fashioned type of work to now relying heavily on virtual things. The Boys and Girls Club, they had a virtual camp. That's all well and good if you've got people who are connected in that kind of stuff. And we know that domestic violence, for instance, and we deal with this stuff on a daily basis. I just left a woman that is from Randolph that actually ran into this situation. she's here looking for help because there's nothing out there for her. But I think we're relying heavily too much on virtual programming, and we're forgetting about the old-fashioned way of doing things. And I hope that we don't go too far away from that and forget about the grandparents that have absolutely no way of signing on virtually to anything, or some of these older couples that have no idea what a computer looks like, so that we don't go from one form of neglect to a brand new form of neglect where we can say, well, we did it on Zoom, or it was done on a video, some sort of a platform somewhere, and we forget about the old-fashioned way of doing things. So I hope that you won't forget to include some of these religious organizations that we have in the community that have the ability of reaching thousands of people in the sense, or some of these community-based organizations that are still doing the work out there that can reach out to a bunch of people, that we don't go, basically all virtual, because it seems that's the theme of what goes on now. You hear everybody, oh, we did this on a Zoom call. We did this on this particular platform, and we're not doing it the old-fashioned way of actually kind of getting that information out there, so people know who to call and who to get it, who they need to get involved in some of the things that they need to get involved in, because it's killing our community.
Well, when I said that we're going to be distributing these reusable bags with the brochures at various places in the communities, obviously we were also talking about churches. The virtual part of it, the Facebook part, again, some things are just dictated by the grant application guidelines, and because of COVID, they didn't want us to have what would be traditional in this, which is a large gathering of hundreds of people. They just didn't want that this particular year. If we do it again next year, it's probably a 99% chance it would be in person. But we are going to be out in person, and by we, I mean officers and our victim advocates will be out with these brochures and bags, giving them to people, talking to people in real life.
Yeah, because I'm hoping that we don't, shy away from the fact, because folks who are involved in this situation are not necessarily on Facebook, or not necessarily going through whatever medium you're talking about. These are individuals who are facing life and death in that situation, yes, behind the four walls in a sense, and we have to figure out a way to reach out to them. So the more resources you can put into bags and some of the things that you can physically pass on or share with individuals, I think would be more productive than just putting something on Zoom and say, yeah, we did it on Zoom, so we've done it, because it's not reaching and getting to what it's supposed to.
That was never our intent, to just say we did something. That was never our intent. We're actually...
Michelle, I'm seeing a lot of that happening in the community, and it's kind of frustrating, because I hear people spending gazillions of dollars just to do something on Zoom, and it's not reaching. I mean, these poor kids are zoomed out. We were zoomed out to a point where, we've been stuck behind talking to a computer screen, and it gets kind of ridiculous at times. So I hope that we do a lot more of...
The good news is there's going to be a lot of summer programming for kids this year. There is a lot of that coming up in person, not virtual. So it is coming. It's been a rough road. You're absolutely right. It has been a rough road getting back to it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Nicastro.
Good evening, Attorney St. James. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Councilor.
I see in the grant synopsis that this is for Facebook videos.
Yes.
Okay. Will you also be showing them on our cable access channels?
We are looking into that, yes. I mean, we had to do Facebook because we can pay to promote that so that more people will see it. And then once the videos are made, yes, we will be talking to the access channels to see if they can also run it.
And who will be making your videos?
We have an intern, Katie McMillan, who has been, she's already shot some footage and she's editing it. She's doing an excellent job.
That's terrific. I took a look at the website for this project, and I noticed that this year is the 40th anniversary, which is amazing.
It is.
Give us an idea of, in non-pandemic times, some other activities to your knowledge that have been utilized.
They used to have guest speakers. Someone would come, someone who, a skilled advocate or someone who ran, say, Dove, the domestic violence organization, would go and speak in communities. I don't know if Brockton ever had this grant. I don't know. The DA's office might have. I don't know.
Right.
but just go and talk to people, or they do prefer, obviously, in-person events, just not this year. So they would have, you could have, one thing they liked was little community fairs where there would be booths from the different resource partners in the city, so that you could go and you could get a brochure from one person, and just people would be trying to gather the community together to help them realize how to support victims. Because this week isn't just about reaching victims, it's about reaching everyone in the community so that you know how, when you see someone who is a victim, you can help educate them on how to get the assistance that they need. Because there's a lot more assistance out there than people realize.
Well, we're all very disappointed that last Thursday Brockton returned to the red zone in terms of incidences of COVID cases. So I understand you're doing it virtually, and I do look forward to being able to resume normal operations, I hope, in 2022. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Azak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mrs. St. James. You mentioned earlier Family and Community Resources, which I serve on their board, and I was happy to see that you've included some of these agencies in the city who are involved with, with victims on a day-to-day basis. So you're working in collaboration with them?
Yes.
Any other organizations? Because there are many in the city.
There are many, and yes, some of these videos will have FCR's one, and then there will be other resource agencies in the city in these videos so that they can tell people what they do also.
I think that's great because we're a big city. We have many different agencies and resources, and sometimes our residents aren't familiar with them until some campaign similar to this happens. So I'm happy to hear that. So thank you. I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
If there's no other questions, I would like to make a motion to send this favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
All right, motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nacastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
That is 10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. Item number 6.
Order, acceptance and expenditure of the total grant award in the amount of $9,240 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Public Health, Bureau of Substance Addiction Services, fiscal year 2021, First Responders Naloxone Grant, to the City of Brockton Police Department, fiscal year 2021, First Responders Naloxone Grant Fund. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, Michelle St. James, Brockton Police Department Grant Specialist.
Move to recommend favorably.
On the motion,
On the motion, Councilor Nacastro.
Attorney St. James? Thank you. And you and I, of course, we exchanged emails about this. I'm wondering how many doses of Narcan that $9,240 will purchase.
It will purchase approximately 300 doses for fire. Police has already purchased this year. And then it will also purchase gloves for both police and fire to use when they're administering Narcan.
Okay. And I also asked you, how many times did the police have to use Narcan last year?
In the calendar year 2020, police used Narcan on 60 individuals, but they used 110 doses. And when I say dose, that is a 4-milligram nasal spray. So there are often you have to use more than one dose. Now, I don't have fire's numbers, but they use Narcan more than our police officers do.
So this is very necessary.
It is very necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Cardozo.
Michelle, sorry.
No.
Yeah, the community trainings that they refer to here, what do you?
We actually haven't done community training. That's something we would like to.
I know, I think it would be super important.
And that is in the offing for hopefully FY22.
Yeah, I know with COVID it's been tough, but I think that would be great to do some community training.
It would. I mean, I underwent community training for how to use Narcan, and it's something that we all should know how to do because it's a very simple thing that can save a life.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Anyone else? Is there a motion?
There was a
Already
motion
made?
that was seconded.
All right, motion made and properly seconded. Would the clerk call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nacastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. Item number 7.
Ordered, acceptance and expenditure of the total grant award in the amount of $1,300 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Health 2021 Massachusetts Unwanted Opioid and Benzodiazepine Product Stewardship Program to the City of Brockton Police Department 2021 Massachusetts Unwanted Opioid and Benzodiazepine Product Stewardship Program Grant Fund. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, Michelle St. James, Brockton Police Department Grant Specialist.
Any questions for Ms. St. James? Counselor Nacastro.
Thank you. Attorney St. James, yet again, I see from the synopsis on this grant of $1,300 that the grant funds will be used to pay officers for the time taken to travel to the CMAS site to dispose of the collected medicines.
Yes.
Do you expect that that would be one trip or multiple trips?
Oh, no, it's multiple trips. They go once a month, sometimes once every 2 months. We actually collect a lot. The last time they went, it had been 6 weeks, and we had collected 60 pounds of drugs.
And people just come into the police station?
Come into the police station, yes. They drop it off. We have 2 kiosks. We swap them out. When one gets full, we bring out the other one.
I've done that in the past at CVS, but I'm not sure CVS is still collecting them. So I should bring them to the police. That's very good information to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michelle, just a quick question. And I wanted to ask this about the previous grants as well. Are there limits on the amount of money that you can actually ask for on some of these grants?
Yes. There's a limit of $5,000 on the Crime Victims Week. There was a limit of $1,300 for this one. For Narcan, you submit what the fire and police together actually will spend. You submit a budget saying this is what we plan to spend. And it was limited in that the state budget was very uncertain coming into this year. So we received a small amount at the beginning of the fiscal year and then the balance. So there was a time there when we weren't sure we were going to be able to get money at all.
And especially with the $1,300 grant, how long did it take you to write that?
Oh, this is honestly the easiest application. I mean, all you have to do is submit pictures of the drug kiosk. This is more of a donation than a grant, honestly, because what happens is there are lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies, and so then they have to donate to they have to give money to a fund, and then that fund has to go towards something that helps with the opioid crisis, and in this case, they're funding getting rid of the drugs. So this application, it's online. This one literally took half an hour.
And these funds were made available basically in the same amounts to all the other communities?
Yes, it is a $1,300 grant.
Right.
Like I said, this stems out of lawsuits.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? If not, is there a motion?
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion made, properly seconded to recommend favorably. Would the clerk call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianieri?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Castro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. Item number 8.
Ordered, transfer of $492,000 from Stabilization Fund to Fire Department Capital for $200,000, Information Technology Center Capital for $136,000, Planning and Economic Development Capital for $120,000, and Weights and Measures Capital for $36,000. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Michael Williams, Chief of Fire, William Santos, Acting Director of Information Technology, Robert May, Director of Planning and Economic Development, Kevin Croker, Weights and Measures.
Councilors, just to compartmentalize this a little bit, let's go in the order that it's on the agenda. So if Mr. Clarkson would focus on Fire Department capital for $200,000 first, and we'll get those questions and evaluation out of the way.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I'll provide a very brief overview of why we have all these items, why they're on the agenda, the source of the funding. if that's okay?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. And I would note very, very briefly on the previous item, I speak from personal experience in sharing with you that those drug take-back events can be life-changing. In fact, in May of 2012, I attended one of the town of Hanover and met somebody at the drug take-back event, and this November, my wife and I will celebrate 5 years of marriage. So you never know who you're going to meet at one of those events.
And she's still with you, I assume?
Indeed, yes, yes. As far as I know, I haven't gone home yet today. So back at last year's budget, as councilors will recall, it was an extraordinary budget period, and the mayor and I met regularly with the superintendent and the CFO of the schools, who's here with us tonight, and our team, and we kept the council informed regularly, and we developed revenue estimates for the overall budget that assumed a reduction in both state aid and Chapter 78. And those conservative estimates, that approach served us very well, because we were able to begin the fiscal year with little, if any, impact to the overall operations. People really stepped up within this building, and less people did more work, but we didn't have to lay anyone off, and there were some impacts in the schools, but less than there otherwise would have been. So during the fiscal year, the legislature, after some amount of a delay, did pass a budget with state aid numbers that significantly exceeded our estimates. If you recall then, back in November, the mayor and I came before you and asked you to place that additional state aid, approximately $15 million, in stabilization until such time as though we had a firm grasp on this year's budget, our projections for next year, and really understood what the impacts were on the operations. So now we are at that point, and we're here in two successive items asking you to appropriate some, not all, some of that $15 million for both amendments to the fiscal year 2021 budget and for capital items. So this portion of it, the $492,000, are those capital items that we believed were urgent and important enough to move forward on now. And so to focus, at the suggestion of the chair, on this first one, Station 1, and I did provide, as always, not only an overview memo, but attached to it was a narrative from each department head. And for the fire department one, I also included, although they're sort of technical, I did include a narrative from the fire chief. And so Station 1 is ancient, fair to say, and we have, in the past year, with the support of the City Council, been able to purchase several new pieces of equipment for the fire department. The floor in Station 1 in the garage portion, the professionals do not believe it's adequate to house one of those pieces of equipment long-term. So this money is suggested to be able to shore up that floor and to be able to safely house any piece of equipment, but particularly the rescue and the 3 new pumpers that were just purchased by the city.
Any questions on that particular item for Mr. Claxon or Chief Williams? Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Troy. I just want to clarify, one of those new engines is at Station 7. You're not going to take that away from us, right?
Yeah, and certainly the chief can answer that, but as I understand fire operations, they do move out depending on where things are deployed and what fire and rescue events occur, and so they do move from station to station depending on mutual aid and those sorts of things.
Yep. Just wanted to make sure the Cary Hill Express stayed the Cary Hill Express. You went through all the trouble of painting it. I just wanted to make sure, but I appreciate the work on this, Mr. CFO. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anything else on this particular item? If not, we'll go on to Information Technology Center, capital for $136,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As noted in the memo from Bill Santos, there are 2 important initiatives in this proposed expense. For a long time, there's been discussed an effort to modernize and digitize the operations of the Board of Health. And so a portion of this money, $100,000, will be to begin to digitize all those records and to provide the ability of our inspectors to work remotely and be able to take a lot of the work that they do online. In addition to that, the IT center itself is really the hub of printing for the city. They print out W-2s, regular payroll receipts, vendor checks. There is an overall effort, and we'll talk about that in the next item, that the mayor has initiated to try to bring a lot of those items online, but we're not quite there yet. So the main printers that are used for a lot of those operations are old and outdated, and so this $36,000 will upgrade those printers so that those vital functions can continue to occur.
All right, any questions on the $136,000 for information technology? If not, we will go on to planning and economic development capital for $120,000.
For some time, there has been discussion about the fact that a large portion of our population, particularly the members of our community who are most economically challenged, not having access to high-speed broadband. And it is a goal of this mayor and of the city to begin to provide that project. Before the infrastructure bill was submitted by the President of the United States, or any of the stimulus money was made available, the process had begun here to really move forward to see what exactly needed to be done in terms of design and implementation of widely accessible broadband in the city. And so this amount would be to actually begin that process and begin to design a potential implementation. It's very timely, of course, because what we believe is the stimulus money that has been provided or committed to by the federal government, and what we believe may be the next round of infrastructure stimulus will be directly for projects like this. And so to have this study completed now and have it, what we call, those of you that remember the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act back a decade ago, they looked for projects that were shovel-ready, and that was the term back then. And we believe that those projects that are ready to go and designed will also be looked favorably upon in this next round. So this money will get us to the point where we'll have a project that's ready to provide broadband to our most needy residents.
All right. Councilor Cardozo.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson. So do we have to, this is sort of like we have to spend this in order to receive any funding, what it seems like. Can we, part of the grants and the funding that's coming, there's a lot of money out here for programs like this. Could we not look into a grant for now? Do we have to spend this amount of money when we know that there's, a possibility that there will be some funds poured into something like this very soon?
Most certainly we could, Councilor. To me, it's a question of timing. We have the opportunity, we're fortunate to have the ability to fund it, and so to be able to do the design work now, to be ready for additional funding when it arrives, I think is critical.
And what does that entail, the design work? What exactly are we spending the money to do?
So the Director of Planning and Economic Development did provide you a memo that went briefly into that, but Mr. May, I believe, is here tonight.
Yes, he is.
Can go into greater detail.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, all.
Good evening, Mr.
Rob May, Director of Planning and Economic Development. So we do have a basic scope of work lined up for our request for proposals. So the first thing we need to do is we need to study the market service and incumbent analysis. We then move on to demand aggregation, determining how much buying power we have, and which is a simple way of saying that. We go into a preliminary design. We look at construction write-out and make-ready. What do we need to do to get the system up and in the ground? We'll prepare a financial model and business plan, and then there'll be a strategy session as to how we roll this out. Will it be a city-operated utility? Will it be assets in the ground that we lease out to other people? under a specific purchase requirement, so there's a lot of things that we need to understand before we get in line for federal funding.
Okay, and is this paying for a consultant to do that, or is this
Yes, ma'am.
paying your staff for?
No, it's a consultant. If it was staff, it would be personnel costs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This isn't, my comments are not based on the item that we're discussing, but something that Mr. Clarkson just brought up. And if you just allow me a little, leeway, just to introduce something. Mr. Clarkson, you and I have had this conversation before in terms of, you mentioned that there's some additional funding that will sure be coming down the pipeline in terms of this new infrastructure bill that is being talked about. I know that we were doing cartwheels and press conferences all over the place because we were told that we're going to get $35 million on the Recovery Act that's been approved. But is there any way that you could, for the purpose of this body and the administration in itself, research the fact that why is it that Brockton, and I'm going to bring this up and then you're going to hear that, it's the population, people do not answer the census and all this and all that, but I'm going to give you some numbers and stuff just to show you that it has nothing to do with population. We are getting $35 million on the funding that we just had the press conference with the congressman here not too long ago. Newton, the city of Newton, with 88,000 people in the books, is going to get $66 million. We are getting 35, they're getting $66 million. Fall River, with 89,000 people, a lot less than Brockton, is going to get $73 million. $73 million. Somerville, with 81,000 people, they're going to get $79 million. We are getting 35 with about 100,000 people. They, with 81,000 people, are going to get $79 million. Malden, with 60,000 people, is going to get $46 million. How can we, in this city, continue to be shunted away from going after? Think about what an additional $20 million can do for Brockton. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to take it away from Newton, but Newton does not have the issues that Brockton has. And they're getting $66 million when we're only getting $35 million. How can we as a city, what do we need to do in terms of pressuring the federal government, knowing that there's going to be some funding coming down the pipelines, that again, just like with this particular recovery funds, we're actually going to get shortchanged as well because it's going to be done based on the same formulas that are used for HUD. And going back to Newton, for instance, when we get around $2.5 million, almost $3 million out of CGBG funds, they're getting $7 million for CGBG. And this goes on and on and on for the number of years that it's actually taken place. But how can we as a city go after the federal government in the sense so that the city can get its fair share? I mean, I don't care if we need to get, hire lawyers and do the thing that we did with the Student Opportunity Act, but actually do something innovative in the sense so that we don't have to sit here and celebrate the fact that we're getting $35 million when these other communities are getting 3 times as much as we're getting. I mean, Boston, yes, Boston is about 6 times larger than Brockton. They're getting about almost $600 million. And here we are getting 35 and thrilled that we're getting 35 when these other communities are getting those large sums of money. Imagine what another $20 million could actually do for our schools or some of the infrastructure that we have in this city. So how can we do that?
Mr. Clarkson, before you answer, I don't mind giving Councilor Rodriguez and former Mayor Rodriguez a little leeway, but I'm not going to give you that much leeway. I think he has raised some substantive questions, but rather than have you, I don't want to say shoot from the hip, but just talk without preparation, I really would prefer that you get together with the mayor, find out, for example, what criteria did they use in these other communities? And I think Councilor Rodriguez can probably give you the list from MMA as to which community received what amount. But I think we'd do a disservice to ourselves and to the public if I just asked you to shoot out a comment or some type of a cogent response to what really is a substantive issue. So what I'd like to do is just ask you to research those issues, get together with him, but I would like to, because we still have 11.3 million to discuss, I would like to go back and focus on item number 8 and the capital improvement for $120,000 for planning and economic development. If you would resume that discussion if there are any other questions. Any other questions on why we need to do an analysis to hopefully bring Brockton into the 21st century here with broadband coverage? If not, is there a motion to recommend?
There's one more.
There's one more.
There is one more, Mr. Chairman.
Weights and measures.
Chairman.
Weights and measures.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are correct. Here I am jumping ahead of myself. Weights and measures, $36,000.
So the final item on the requested transfer for capital items is a new vehicle for the Department of Weights and Measures. And attached in your packet was a recent quote for a repair bill for the current vehicle, which is, I believe, a 2005, if I remember correctly, 2008 Ford 150. So it is past its prime, certainly, and the current repair request is probably more than the vehicle is worth. So this is a standard replacement that would normally occur in the operating budget or in a capital plan, but because the operating budget was so significantly reduced last year, none of those items except police cruisers were included. So this is showing up here now and is obviously an overdue request. And I'm happy to answer any question on that or any of the other items in here.
Okay. Any questions on the
Just a quick,
$36,000?
quick one.
Councilor Cardozo.
Sorry, Troy, I missed the part maybe of how many vehicles are we talking here? Is this one vehicle?
One Ford F-150 truck, and there is a quote from MHQ, which is an authorized provider of municipal vehicles.
How much do those vehicles cost?
This quote is for $33,351.70.
Is that to purchase or repair?
No, that's to purchase.
Okay.
The repair quote was for $8,000, but that's for the old 2008 vehicle that's currently used. So the $33,000 would be for a brand new
Gotcha.
truck.
Thank you.
All right.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the
Second.
full city council.
All right. All 4 of these will be recommended favorably. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak,
Yes.
Cardozo,
Yes.
Ianary,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan. Councilor Monahan?
Councilor Monahan?
Yes.
And you're voting yes, correct?
He doesn't know.
Yes.
Thank you.
He has no idea.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
He doesn't know.
Yes.
And Thompson.
Yes.
10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. Item number 9.
Ordered, transfer of $11,389,487 from the stabilization fund to various departments such as animal control, auditing, finance department, human resources, law department, library, mayor's office, parks and recreation, public property, schools, and treasurer collector. Invited, Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Thomas DeCellis, Supervisor, Animal Control, Anne Marie Raymond, Interim City Auditor, Sandra Knight, Director of Human Resources, Megan Bridges, City Solicitor, Paul Engel, Library Director, Timothy Carpenter, Superintendent of Parks, James Plouffe, Building Commissioner, Aldo Petronio, Chief Financial Officer, Brockton Public Schools, Martin Brophy, Treasurer Collector.
Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
We'll compartmentalize these two, but I know you want to present an overview. So.
Sure, I know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council. It's good to be back, and I want to thank you all. I want to thank the President for working to make sure this happens, and I hope that you and your families had a nice Easter or Passover, whatever you celebrate. Tonight is a good night. As you recall, when we were here almost a year ago, and we'll be back in short order again for the next budget, we didn't know. It was uncertain, right? So we had to be effective forecasting. It was conservative, but it was real. And again, I think Troy just hit it on the head. It was working together, working with our state delegation every Tuesday on a call, working with then Council President Azak, working with Aldo and Troy and Mike Thomas, and we forecasted correctly. So thanks to you, when the money came in from Beacon Hill, we were able to put that stabilization. What was just before you was capital projects. What's before you now is operating budget for specific departments. It's extremely important that we realize that our departments here at City Hall really did a great job with cost containment measures. I mean, we had no layoffs on the city side, and that was something that we were hopeful for, but we weren't 100% certain until we came before you, because we just didn't know. So what's before you tonight on my endeavor, and I do want to thank Troy for giving an update. It's two different line items. One is $100,000 under other contracted services, and the other one is $50,000 relative to consulting. In terms of the $100,000, this is something, and I want to thank Councilor Cardoza for filing resolve recently. We weren't in person, but we were on Zoom, and it's about a youth commission. We need to make sure that we provide services, from mental awareness issues to job awareness issues to working together relative to educational matters. And that's another endeavor that will be before you when all that comes before you tonight. I think it's extremely important that we do this now. And I know a question was asked to me earlier, well, how'd you come up with $100,000, Bob? You know, why that figure? And I'll just tell you quite honestly, it's a figure that I feel is appropriate based upon the needs of what we need to do as a community. Maybe it's not enough, maybe it's too much, but at the end of the day, I think that the community itself and the commission will really dictate how we spend the money that's allocated. So that's why the $100,000 is before you tonight. It's going to be kind of a myriad of what we can do on the city side and then on the school side as well. The $50,000 is really kind of, in essence, to come back before you to explain about what I've done in terms of modernizing. The fact that city employees don't all get direct deposit in the year 2021 is ludicrous. To be able to do online services, that makes sense. We need to spend some money so that we can save money at the end of the day. Also within this is consulting amounts for a percentage of what Dr. Rick Herman has done. And I know, and I want to thank the Accounts Committee, I know that they looked at that. I'll be very blunt. Rick gets paid $175 an hour. He wanted $400 because that's what he gets as a former chief R when he does telemedicine. And I said, absolutely not. And to his credit, he said, no, I'm going to modernize it and bring it down. And he did. But it's an hourly rate, and we're getting 100% reimbursed on that, 100%. Now, another question was asked to me today, where's the 18 million bucks? Where's the 18 million bucks? Where is it? I would tell you that I had a meeting in my office. I asked the gentleman from the county to please come here. We don't want to do the Zoom, what Moses just said. Let's get face to face. Let's talk to talk and walk to walk. Where's the money? And they both came. Treasurer O'Brien came, and the new chair, which is Greg Hanley, Dan Pilata retired, and Troy. And we were very blunt. We have 18 million bucks that we're entitled to, and we want every single penny of that 18 million. And they have assured us, and I'm going on the record to say it, they have assured us that we will get it before the end of the fiscal year, the last day in June. Technically, under the law, they have until the last day of the calendar year in December. But they have assured us that the city of Brockton will be reimbursed the full 18 million. And I will tell you that as of now, we got $1 million bucks, we got the 7 million for the laptops, and another 800 grand. So they owe us about another 9 million bucks. And Troy's going to talk about that tonight. But that's what, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that's what these two line items are relative to the mayor's office. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Cardoza.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Councilor.
Thank you. So with the consulting for the youth programs, would you be, do you have, I'm sure you're still working on it, but involving some members of the community to help in some of that consultation, to help guide the work that you're thinking of doing?
You're one of them, Councilor. I asked you that day on the Zoom with Superintendent. I hope you say yes.
Very good.
Absolutely. We need that. We need to get really a great representation across the city, from all aspects, and I welcome that, and we need that, quite honestly.
Very good, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I don't know if this is appropriate for you or maybe for Troy, but as you know, last year I had some issues with the budget. So I'm hoping that this year, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask now, that we get the budget in a timely manner so that we can do a deep dive into it. You know, it's super important, especially as new counselors, for us to have some time to be able to, you know, go through the budget and not get it a week or 2 weeks before we have to vote on it. Is that
and-
something that?
Yeah, so we did it 8 days before. I will say, when I sat up there a couple times, we got it the weekend before. We will be able to get it sooner, and I know that because the state delegation and Lita Cronin and the team have told us that we'll be getting our numbers soon, so we'll be able to do it. I will tell you, though, I'm going to steal the thunder from Troy. The City of Brockton's budget that you passed has been recognized and honored by GOFA certification. Never in the history of Brockton has any budget been submitted and accepted for GOFA, and you can explain that, Troy, but we will get that sooner this year.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank
you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you,
Anyone
Mr.
else on the mayor's office? If not, let's go to one of my favorite departments, animal control. Take care of our four-legged friends.
All right, so briefly, just to follow on with what the mayor said, Mr. Chairman, so this group of items does indeed represent amendments to the operating budget. So you'll see some of, particularly for the positions, some of the salary numbers are far lower than what a position would be paid for a full year, but that's because they are amending this year's budget, so we only need a portion of the money to get us through to June 30th. And thank you. Happy to have the mayor steal the thunder, but happy to repeat, I mean, it was an incredible team effort that included the mayor's staff and my team and our former budget director, Karen Praval, for Brockton to be recognized for the first time in its history with the Distinguished Budget Award from the Government Finance Officers Association demonstrates this city's commitment to transparency and modernization, which I know is important to all of you. So it's really a pleasure to work with such a great team and to be able to have that validated by an international organization that we're among the finest communities, not only in the Commonwealth, but in North America for setting that high standard for transparency. So as it relates to animal control, there are two items, one for $8,274 and one for $6,100. One is for providing animal control with a long-awaited administrative assistant to help in that department. As you know, they do operate remotely. And then the other one is to provide radios for the animal control officers so that they are literally in sync with the other first responders and public safety departments. And Director Tom DeCellis is here should you have any additional questions.
Any questions on the 14,409? If not, we will move on to auditing.
So, auditing, in addition to being literally the bookkeeper for the community, coordinates payroll out of that office and coordinates payroll for both the city and the schools. And so, as you can imagine, they're very, very busy. And so the acting auditor who is here with us tonight, Anne Marie Raymond, was able to recently fill a vacant position, and a portion of this money will go toward that. There is also a request to create an additional payroll clerk, which we agree is also very necessary. It's because of other expenses within the auditing department, those costs have increased since this initial request, and so it's likely that we will be back to you for seeking some additional money depending on how the recruitment process goes to fill this position. But this will at least get us a portion of what is needed for this department.
All right. Questions on the $10,315? If not, we will move on to Finance Department.
So in the Finance Department, generally the operation for many, many years has been a budget director, 2 financial analysts, a junior financial analyst, and an administrative person. Pre-pandemic, we promoted the junior financial analyst to financial analyst, leaving that position vacant for the time. As with many departments, as you can see tonight, the Finance Department shared in the sacrifice for this budget and did not fill that position. So this money is just a prorated amount to fill that vacant but existing position for the remainder of this fiscal year.
Questions on the $11,463? If not, we move on to Human Resources.
So this request is simply a function of the number of vacancies that exist in the city right now. When a position is vacant, there's a need to advertise, and as has already been mentioned tonight, a need to advertise beyond the traditional means of newspapers and the Mass Municipal Association. And so specialized positions that may have their own professional association or that may need a wider distribution to attract the best candidate require advertising in lots of different places, and that requires funding. And so this request will increase the ability of the Human Resource Department to advertise to fund those positions. And much like in the auditing department, because of additional vacancies that have occurred since we filed this, it's likely that we will be back to you in the not-too-distant future seeking probably another $10,000 in addition to this.
Okay, Councilor Cardozo.
Mr. Clarkson, maybe Ms. Knight can speak to some of the platforms just for the public as far as where she's advertising. I know I've asked in the past, but it's always good to kind of reiterate what we're doing.
Sure. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Yeah, we advertise in the Enterprise, Patriot Ledger, local advertising. We also advertise, like Troy said, the MMA. We also advertise with different social media outlets, like Indeed or, LinkedIn or anything like that. And depending on the specialty, we'll advertise in specific areas. If we need a solicitor, we'll look into, Lawyers Weekly or something like that. If it's a building, some type of building position, I would seek Jim's, recommendation on where we should post it. So it depends on where we would post it and how much it would cost then.
Okay, how long are you advertising for typically?
It depends on the position. Sometimes, depending on the level of the position, it could be open until filled. Like we've done before. It could be 3 weeks. It could be 2 weeks. So it all depends on the level of the position.
Okay. Do we do Indeed? Is that part of it?
We do Indeed.
Okay. And any LinkedIn or?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And we've been pretty successful too. I mean, given that when I presented last year in November and you saw the numbers that we are reaching populations that we wouldn't reach. I mean, we had positions that, people from out of state have applied to and we interviewed for. So what we're doing is working, I should say. Slowly, but it's
slowly. And then as far as recruiting more people of color, are there any platforms that we've used to help recruit?
Yes, let's say for like the assistant city solicitor position. I've advertised in the, I think they call it Latino or Hispanic lawyers, the Black Lawyers Association. So, like I said, I'm out there trying to look in those specific, Bay State Banner, I've hit those two. So it all depends, like I said, the level of the position and outreach.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything more on the $10,000 for Human Resources? If not, we will move on to Law Department.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer questions on behalf of the Law Department. The solicitor was out ill today, and so she's not able to be here tonight. But these amounts, so each year, Brockton and all municipalities budget money to pay medical bills for employees and retirees who have work-related injuries. And so it's an unpredictable guessing game, frankly, that from year to year it ebbs and flows. This year's budget, as part of the belt tightening that we experienced for this year, was level funded, although despite the fact that we saw an upward trend in the costs, we level funded the budget. And so this, both the 175 and the 200 are to address ongoing claims and costs that we have for those employees.
Okay, Councilor Ianieri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, just explain to me one more time, and I guess my question is to you that, is this above and beyond what we already had put in the budget early on?
Yes.
And what was the amount that we gave Mr. Clarkson at that particular time? Do you recall? Do you have it in front of you?
Well, Counselor, I thought you might ask that question, which is why I brought my handy-dandy budget, award-winning budget book with me.
That's why I interviewed you, see?
So the amounts for workers' comp medical in this year's budget was $765,183 and $125 for medical. And that is the same as the fiscal year 2020 amount. And so these amounts that are being sought are in excess of that. But again, it's for when employees, any employee has a work-related injury, the city assumes those medical costs.
Do you see us at this point being over, beyond what we've had over the last maybe couple of fiscal years, or are we pretty much just in line with?
Well, the actual spent in fiscal year 2019, which is 2 fiscal years ago, was $883,000. And so we budgeted in FY '20 $890, and again this year budgeted $890,000. And so this is as much a function of increasing healthcare costs as it is the amount of claims. But I'm sure Attorney Bridges can provide more specific information on numbers of claims, should you want. But in my professional opinion, this is a reasonable amount given the trend that we've seen.
Okay. That may be a question that could come up at that time when we're doing the budget, just to see where we're at that point too. So
absolutely,
I would think that's where the question would want to be. I just want to see where we're at now, because April, May, June. I mean, yeah, okay. So we're pretty much where we've been over the last couple of times. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Cardozo.
Mr. Clarkson, how does this department compare to others as far as the amount that we're spending for these costs? Is this a much larger department than others as far as this budget? Like, can you just explain to me?
Sure. Good question, Counselor. So no matter the source of the department where the employee works, they're paid out of the law department. So this is an aggregate amount for the entire city.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Councilor Azak, then Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Clarkson. So my question is kind of similar to my colleagues, Councilor Cardoso, but in a different way. So why is it that they all come out of the law department and not out of the individual? Like, it would make sense to me to be able to keep track of different departments' budgets. Why wouldn't they come out of each, depending on what department the employee belonged to?
So I would suggest, Counselor, from a budgeting perspective, it's actually more efficient to do it this way. If you recall, for this year's operating budget, we took cell phone budgets from each individual department and consolidated them so that there's just one budget line item. But the law department does keep excellent records of the individual claims and what departments have trends and which don't. Yeah, and so I'm sure Attorney Bridges, with due deference for privacy, but could talk about those trends with you.
So do we have a specified person in the law department that takes care of this information?
Yes.
Just like in personnel, we have somebody that just does insurance, so there is somebody that just is in charge of this information?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clarkson, just a quick question. Since we've all been affected by COVID-19, could we in turn turn this, at least the medical portion of this billing into the CARES Act for reimbursement? I mean,
I would say
after
no,
all,
unless we could somehow directly relate the work-related injury to COVID.
no, I'm not saying the workman's comp portion. I'm talking about the medical piece. Knowing that some city employees were affected by COVID-19 and they were out on a medical because of COVID-19, could we not justify utilizing some of those funds some of those expenses to get that reimbursed into the city from the CARES Act?
Sure, if there were a direct correlation between the person being out and COVID-19, yes.
No, I'm not talking about necessarily the people that were, this is probably not, it has nothing to do with this specific, line item. I'm saying in general, out of this, since the city is self-insured and we pay for insurance for its employees, could we not justify utilizing some of that expenses out of the CARES Act in general
I see what you're saying. Okay.
from the medical side of things?
The answer to that is yes, and we have. So a portion of, because early on in the pandemic, a decision was made here in Brockton and in any self-insured community that COVID-related costs would not be borne by the employees. And despite that, so the city, as a self-insured entity, assumed direct COVID-related medical costs, and any copay or employee costs were assumed by the health plan. And despite that, as you may know, the health plan itself finished with a surplus, a significant surplus, which is why we were able to offer our employees a premium holiday last year. And so if those costs are directly related to COVID for the self-insured group, those can be reimbursable, yes.
So is that something that you're looking into?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
But thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Clarkson, just for the public, we're self-insured, someone breaks a leg, we pay the medical costs for the broken leg, we would pay for any prescriptions, we would pay for any physical therapy, we pay for transportation to and from physical therapy, and so that's where, in the aggregate, all of this money goes. Is that a fair statement, so people understand what we're doing?
That is absolutely correct, if that broken leg is directly related to that person's job. If they decide to go skiing and break a leg, we still pay the cost, but it goes under the general insurance.
And the law department constantly, if I'm right, monitors all of these claims so that we don't find someone sitting out there with a relatively minor injury, but they're out of work for 6 months and going to different doctors. In other words, we could send someone for an independent medical exam or...
Absolutely, indeed,
I just want the public to know that we don't spend this willy-nilly, as they say. So,
No, they do an excellent job of oversight for these costs.
Councilor Cardozo, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So speaking of self-insured, Mr. Clarkson, have you looked into the state GIC to see if that, I was going to ask that at some point of you, if that would save us money on our insurance, save the city money if we were able to purchase? Have you compared the two? I'm sure at some point. Is that something that you can provide the council?
Happy to provide that. I have in the past. I have not conducted that analysis here because our unions operate under an agreement with the city that was initiated when the law was changed in 2011 and allowed communities to send employees directly to the GIC without negotiation. The city of Brockton and its employee unions crafted and executed an employee agreement that has been renewed a couple of times. It was renewed under Mayor Rodriguez and is up for renewal. And so that under that agreement, the city and the unions agree to continue with the city's health insured program. I will further answer that by offering you my professional opinion as someone who has dealt with public health insurance for many, many years now. Some of the group insurance commission plans do indeed offer plans that are less costly, but I would not characterize that as savings because it simply shifts the burden from the municipality to the employees.
Well, I hear that there's a higher copay for certain things, but if it's going to save the city millions, I think that I would like to see that comparison at some point, if you wouldn't mind.
Certainly, we can talk about that. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. No other, Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clarkson, I think I would agree with Councilor Cardozo about I think it'd be beneficial for the body to see the comparison. But is there a way for you to factor in also how the city's how the city has the advantage from the agreement or agreements with the public unions? What we would be paying without the agreement and what we are paying now with it. Because the last time this came up, it was put to me that we were able to make an agreement that benefited us more than the GIC. But if that agreement needs to keep being made, we need to keep making sure that it's still the most opportune for the city. And I think it could be if we did it right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Counselor. All right, let's move on to library.
So, municipal libraries in Massachusetts are certified by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, and a major part of that certification has to do with the funding of the community as a percentage of its overall budget. In this current fiscal year budget, the library budget, as many of the others, was reduced to be able to meet our revenue estimates. As a result, I worked closely with Library Director Paul Engel, and we submitted a request for a waiver to the MBLC. That waiver was approved, so we did not, thankfully, lose our certification. This $45,000 will get us back for this year to certification level funding, and at least in the preliminary budget for FY22, that funding will also meet certification standards.
Okay.
Library Director is here if you have any additional questions.
Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Engel a question.
Councilor?
I think it's great you obtained that waiver because having that certification is crucial. I'm just wondering, so you had a $45,000 reduction, so what did you cut? And so therefore, what will you be restoring?
It's out of the goods and services, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep. So it's books, periodicals, materials for circulation.
So we purchased fewer circulation materials?
Yes.
So you'll be restoring that?
Absolutely.
With those funds? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, further questions for library? If not, we will move on to Parks and Recreation. We've covered the mayor's office.
So in Parks and Recreation, typically the operations of the Manning Pool are shared between the Parks and Recreation Department and the community schools, but because of the pandemic and the reduced operation of the community schools, the entirety of the cost of those operations fell to the Parks and Recreation Department. And so since we're still in that same fiscal year from last summer, those costs were incurred last summer, but within this fiscal year. So this funding that's requested by Tim Carpenter will restore that and allow the Parks and Recreation Department to not operate at a loss.
All right. Questions? If not, we will move on to public property.
Public property. So that is overtime costs for various projects and purposes within the Public Property Department, including work that our teams do. As you know, in public property, in addition to custodians, there are several professional tradespeople that provide a variety of service. Those services are provided to all departments. There was a practice in the past where those departments would then be essentially billed by public property, and that's a lot of administrative paper going back and forth for money that's all in the same pot, so to speak. And so rather than bill out those departments like the Traffic Commission or the library, those costs have remained in the budget for the library, public property, but the costs, because of that practice, there's lots of work that's performed, and so that money is requested in this item.
All right. Questions for public property? If not, we will move on to schools, and I see Mr. Petronio here.
So my friend and colleague Aldo Petronio, the school CFO, is here. This, by far the largest of the item, but probably the most straightforward. As part of that budget planning process, we significantly reduced our estimated Chapter 70 or school aid number. That number came in far greater than we had anticipated. That's actually very good news. And so this $10.2 million is additional Chapter 70 education aid that would be part of the city's ability to meet the net school spending number for this year.
Any questions for the schools? If not, we will move on to...
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Cardone.
So I think Troy had asked about the CARES Act funding and how that played into, just for the public, can you explain a little bit how that plays into this money now that we're working with as far as the money that we already received from the CARES Act?
So the CARES Act money is reimbursable. So the schools had significant millions of dollars in expenses related to the CARES Act. Furniture, PPE, additional personnel costs to distance learning, equipment, technology, the list goes on and on. Those costs were borne by the school department within this year's operating budget, and then the budget is being restored as those reimbursements come in. This money is different because the actual overall budget for the schools was reduced. So there were positions that weren't filled. There were some layoffs. There were some initiatives that were not undergone because the overall budget for the school department was reduced by a significant amount. So this amount will begin to restore the operating budget to a level that meets the city's requirement for net school spending, because the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has a minimum spending requirement for the city to meet, and with this additional Chapter 70 aid, we'll be required by DESE to meet a higher number, so this will allow us to get the school budget to a place where we're able to meet our obligations from the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Further questions? If not, we will move on to Treasurer Collector.
So there are two items under Treasurer Collector. One is full-time salaries, and again, that is restoring an existing but unfilled position that was not filled this fiscal year. So it's a prorated amount for the remainder of this fiscal year to fill an administrative position within the Treasurer Collector's department. And then the Medicare tax is another one of those ebb and flow obligations of the city to pay on an annual basis. We level funded it this year at $3 million, which is the same amount from the previous year. So this will get us more in line to what our obligations are to pay that ongoing obligation. And you'll likely see an FY22 request that increases it by a little more. So this is an obligation that's just dependent on the number of employees that we have in the payroll of the city.
All right. Questions on Treasurer Collector? Mr. Clarkson, I appreciate that personally. I appreciate you being so well prepared.
Thank you.
I think the department heads are thrilled to be here, but they didn't have to speak. So seriously, thank you. This could have droned on for quite some time had you not put the work in with the department heads to present the information. And
thank you very much.
Thanks to you and the mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and the committee. I do also just want to acknowledge the workers' comp employee is Michelle Yaffe. She works out of the solicitor's office. That's her whole focus is workers' comp. So we will get the information relative to the GIC, and I just thank you for your time tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Aye, Councilor Castro.
I have a question for Mr. Clarkson. Sorry. Mr. Clarkson, thank you. I'm wondering, what is the current balance of the stabilization account?
So we have two stabilization accounts. One is the general stabilization, and the other is what's called the Chapter 324 stabilization account, as many of you know. And before we put in, and I'm going to approximate for you, but I'll give you an exact number tomorrow. Before we put the 15 million in, there was approximately $10 million between those two. And so we added 15 to an amount of about 25. We're taking 11 out, almost 12, and so approximately 13. So we didn't spend the entirety of the 15, and I'm glad you asked that question, Counselor, because we do anticipate that there may be other needs for the remainder of this year or in next fiscal year that we'll be able to meet with that additional money.
Okay. In November, this council approved, at your request, our placing 15.1 million in the stabilization fund. Okay, if we take into account the items discussed this evening, number 8 and number 9, they total $11.88 million, which means we'll have about $3.25 million left of that $15 million. And so I just wondered, and you can let us know, I'd need to know before next Monday, at the end of the day, if, you know, after 8 and 9 are deducted, what will we have left in our stabilization fund?
Yeah, happy to get you that exact figure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Further questions?
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second. Motion has been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably all items back to the full council. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
10 in the affirmative.
All right. If any department heads need to leave, please, you won't disturb us. Please, thank you very much for your attendance tonight and for your work. Item number 10.
Ordered. Pursuant to provisions of General Laws, Chapter 43, Section 59A, as appears below, an election shall be held to fill said vacancy of the position of Ward 1 Counselor. Invited Cynthia Scrivani, Executive Director of Elections. Shannon Resnick, Legislative Counsel.
Councilors, I know I filed this, so I'll defer to Attorney Resnick for comment on the law and where we are now, absent any other action by the council.
Yep, so what has not yet been submitted, but I believe will show up on tomorrow's agenda, is a proposal from Councilor Monahan and Councilor Rodriguez for a home rule petition to the state for its special act that would provide for a one-time exemption to avoid a special election. But that hasn't been acted upon yet by the council, so the first time it would be heard would be next Monday. You are able to act under the suspension of rules that night, and at that point in time, if that is supported by this council, it then passes to the state legislators, and we're subject to their timeline. I know Councilor Monahan was going to try and figure out, you know, if this was something that we could realistically get done by the summer. But so the answer as to when a special act providing a one-year exemption for a special election, we don't know that just yet. So otherwise, your ordinance, which provides for a special election, stays in place until we get the special act approved.
Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Resnick, so if we submit to the state, if we submit a request to the state, so first of all, we can vote on this, however, tonight, just a recommendation to go back to the council for next week, and then we can vote, however, on the request for a home rule petition. If the state takes too long, if we decide to pass a home rule petition and the state takes too long to come back and tell us we're good to go or no, and we have to have the election, either way, if they take too long and we run out of time, is the council, is the city in violation? Is it on this body for not calling for an election?
Someone could challenge you in court, and they would request the court to order you to start a special election. So that is something that you would be subject to without having the state special exemption. One of the things that you could find comfort in is we mirrored it to be the same process and format that Boston just adopted. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to the state legislature. The one for Boston passed fairly easily and quickly up through the governor. So it would be something that they know was coming. They could understand what the cost was to the city of Boston, see that as well as a cost to the city of Brockton, and it is only for a one-year exemption. So it has a little bit more favoritism, I would expect, to get it done. You're subject to their legislative sessions. So I can't advise you to pause what your ordinance says that you're obligated to do, but I think that you are taking the appropriate steps and getting this done as quickly as we have. As soon as we finish the finance meeting, excuse me, the city council meeting, this was drafted within a day or two to get the special election home rule petition on your next agenda. So that does show good faith on the council in responding to that.
All right, I appreciate it. I may have more questions later. I'm still not entirely sure about surrendering control to another body when we're on a timetable like this, but if I have any other questions later, I'll bring them up.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just a legal question. Could this be postponed until the next FinCom, because then you'll know what's happening with the home rule petition?
You can. But you don't have an obligation to call. There's nothing in your ordinance that says a special election needs to be called within 3 months from now. But you shouldn't be trying to purposely avoid what your ordinances say. So I'm not going to advise you to continue or table this matter for the purposes of this going away, but if you need additional time, you want to see what the special, the home rule petition looks like at the next meeting, you want to see how that vote plays out, that's something within your discretion right now, but not to avoid the operation of the ordinance.
Wow. I'm going to start with Councilor Mendez, who has not had a chance tonight.
Thank you. I wanted to hear also from Cynthia before we decided whether to postpone or what we're doing it to the next FinCom, just because I wanted to give her an opportunity to explain to the council and also to the city what would this entail if we were going with our current ordinance to her in her office to really put and hold an election before our election this year. So I really wanted to hear from her and have her explaining to us what that would cost and timelines and all of the great things that goes into election. I love to hear it.
So because of the ordinances, you do know you'd have to have 2 elections. You would have to have the preliminary election if there were more than 2 people that wanted to run for that position, and then you'd have to have a general special election. Each election would cost roughly about, and again, it's roughly about $15,250. That's not counting postage, because if anybody or everybody in Ward 1 wanted to vote by mail, we have to mail them a ballot. So at 65 cents a ballot and about 9,000 people in Ward 1, the postage could get fairly costly. 2 elections. I probably need about 2 months to get an election together. You have to get nomination papers. They have to come get them. They have to have time to get signatures. Then once they come back, we have to figure out who's going to be on the ballot. We have to program the cards that go in the machines. We have to make the ballots. We have to test the ballots. So that's about what I have.
Just a point of order, if I could, Mr.
Well, yeah, state your point of order, please.
Yeah, I just want, let's just go back a minute, because I never even thought in my own mind, because you could have 3 people that decide to run and you got a preliminary election, okay? And at the same time, now you got the nomination papers going out for the election process to get elected for this coming year, am I correct? At the same time.
At May 1st will be the paper, May 3rd papers are available for the September preliminary.
Here we are already, we're April 5th, and by the time you get things going and printed, we're already April 30th, and now we're...
I'm thinking the end of June if
bang,
it
bang,
were to go through.
Boom. To me, I mean, I know I've only been around for maybe too long, but still, and whatever everyone wants to say about me, that's fine, but it only makes logistically sense that we just have, you know, an appointment and just allow the people to run for that office the right way. When I hear people say, well, Ward 1 needs to get their person elected, they'll get their person elected no matter which way. But I think this is going to put you in more of a cluster than anything else.
And the person, whoever is going to run their
Three,
run
maybe.
now, and then they have to go and get signatures again in September. And then the council would have to, because with the new election laws that are in place until June 30th, the council would have to decide, are we going to allow the voters to do early voting because of COVID? They don't want to all be in, you know, so are you going to do early voting, which you're only required to have it open the same hours that the office at City Hall is open? And do you want to do early voting at City Hall? Do you want to do it outside of City Hall? We usually use Westgate Mall for citywide, but it's only one ward. I mean, do you want to open it up on a Saturday to the public? There's all kinds of different
Councilor
variations.
Yanieri, I'm not sure that was a point of order, and I don't want to usurp the floor from Councilor Mendez, so.
I appreciate it, and I apologize, Counselor, because it just hit me that, you know, I think it's just, I don't know. And then we won't be able to give out water, I'm sure if it's too warm that day, right? So forget about it.
Councilor Mendez, you have the floor.
So hypothetically, the same person could be running for both elections at the same time?
Well, whoever's going to be running, you assume that they want that position. So they're going to run now to take it now, and you're going to assume that they're running because they want it. And so in September, yes, they would have to pull nomination papers again and do the whole process over.
Yes, thank you.
Certainly, it's my pleasure.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cindy, nice to see you again.
And you.
Mr. Chairman, I think based on what the description of the executive director of the elections, we're looking at a 2 to 3 month process anyways. I don't think we owe it to anyone to hurry this process up if there's an opportunity for us to save the taxpayers of this community some of these headaches and funds. To be honest with you, I think we've got the homeroom petition coming in front of this body next week. If we suspend the rules and put it through, we can kind of get it out of the way next week and let it be on its way. So by the time the whole process goes through, I think it'll be done sooner than if we actually were able to hold an election here in the city. A lot safer and a lot less costly. And that's something that I think we need to take into account. I mean, we're sitting here discussing, you know, $1,300 here, $1,200 here, $500 here. We know that the summer months are coming, and we're looking to provide summer jobs to a lot of the kids in this community. And yet we have an opportunity to do a simple process to go through the state to spare the community of a costly and perhaps even a headache of an election. I think we owe it, you know, to everybody to basically go, you know, to basically stay the course, go through the other channels that we're going through in hopes that we can get this thing done probably sooner than if it was actually to go through a regular election process. If this body gets to appoint a person on a temporary basis, I think we make it fair to those individuals that want to run for this particular office. We're not giving anybody an unfair advantage or even taking some advantages away from other individuals. I think we as responsible elected officials that we are, I think we owe it to the taxpayers to do whatever we can to make sure that this process is followed as Boston did, and then we are actually able to do that here in the city as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Councilor Azak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Madam Director.
Good evening, Councilor.
So you gave us a figure. You said between 5,000 to how much?
I said it's going to be about $15,250 for one election, and you, if more than 2 people want to run, it's $15,250 for times 2, and that's only a rough estimate.
Correct. So I agree with Councilor Rodriguez. I think with the home rule petition being in place and having it go through that process will save the taxpayers money. And what we're not mentioning is that with this process, we're also going to be, it'll be during budget hearings, budget season, which is right end of May, beginning of June. We're also going to go into summer sessions, so whoever is elected, or whatever, is only going to attend 2 meetings into a month. So we're going through this whole process really. I think we're rushing. If we were to go that route, we would be rushing really for no need at all. I mean, it's not like we have these volume of meetings, but we'll be in summer session, and then we're going to go into election season. So all this to say that I agree with Councilor Rodriguez, and I think we should just breathe and go through the process and of the home rule petition. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there perhaps a motion to postpone?
Motion to recommend, oh.
I can't see, all right, Councilor Nicastro, I can't see you through the plexiglass.
No. Actually, Ms. Cravani, I do have a question for Attorney Resnick. Thank you. Attorney Resnick, good evening.
Good evening.
I understand all that everyone is saying, and of course I want to save taxpayers' money, but I'm also an attorney by practice, and so I ask you, why would the city have an ordinance and you know, and a long-standing ordinance at that? And I understand simpler times. There wasn't a pandemic when this ordinance was written. This has been invoked before, but our ordinance is specifically on point. And I would like to get your thoughts.
So just want to clarify, it's not an ordinance in so much as like this isn't something that the ordinance committee can change in the future. It's part of your charter. Okay. So this was a long-standing tradition for municipalities that adopted your form of government to go this route that had wards. At first, when I looked at it, I said, well, this could happen again. Should we make this a change not specific to this year, but in terms of getting it done, and mirroring what Boston just did, it made more sense to protect your financial interest right now, to do it as a 1-year exemption. But it's an old charter provision. And unfortunately, to change your charter, you need to go ask the state for approval. And there is enough disagreement and disruption that causes to municipalities. There's a lot of pushback from municipalities who want to get away from the home rule petition route and reserve the right of municipalities to function on their own. So when you see the home rule petition, it has language in that nature to allow the municipality to decide what's best for the municipality. But it's just old language.
Okay, and I have had people say to me, well then how could you allow Ward 1 to not be represented at this time? But I would remind everyone that we have 4 at-large councilors who at all times represent the entire city, including Ward 1, and I think that's as it should be.
Yeah. And I am not advising the council in this specific instance what you should do. I'm just letting you know what your options are. It's up to you how you want to proceed here to protect your residents' interests and the city's interests. These are the 2 routes you can go.
Thank you, Attorney Resnick. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to recommend favorably. Councilor Cardozo.
On the motion, I thought we were moving to postpone this to the next FinCom.
Oh.
Till after the,
You could do that at the council meeting.
okay.
You could.
So what are we voting on tonight?
So you would be voting on whether to recommend favorably, but once it hits council, it could be sent back to FinCom, or you could postpone it to the next city council meeting, and by then you should know where we are with respect to a home rule petition.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So there has been a motion made and properly seconded to recommend this favorably. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
10 in the affirmative.
All right, it will come up at council on Monday for further review. Item number 11.
Resolved that the City Council, in conjunction with its Legislative Council, establish an ad hoc committee to discuss and make recommendations for considerations by the City Council for amendments to the City Council for amendments to the city ordinances and/or city charter relative to the functions, responsibility, job description, and accountability of the positions of City Clerk, Assistant City Clerk, and Clerk of the Council. Invited, Shannon Resnick, Legislative Counsel, Sandra Knight, Director of Human Resources.
Councilor Rodriguez, you filed this, so you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee, as you know, I have served this body since 2013, and actually I've had the privilege of serving as the city's mayor as well. And in both functions, there has been so much unknown in the sense when it comes to the duties and responsibilities of the clerk and the clerk's office. And I felt that it was time for us to set aside an ad hoc committee to look into the job description, the responsibilities, the line of accountability to that office, since it's such a crucial office. But yet, when I was in the mayor's office, you would say, well, the clerk's office does not answer to the administration, and they're a product of the city council. And then we come to the city council, you hear that the clerk's office does not answer or is a product of the city council as well. Therefore, it's in limbo somewhere, and I think it.
Technical
hear my
feedback,
voice.
Councilor Rodriguez. I
is
don't
that what
dare
it is?
touch this
Oh, okay.
phone.
I'm hearing myself, and it's scaring the daylights out of me. But I think we owe it to the taxpayers of this community to clarify what hasn't been cleared in the past, as far as who's responsible for what, and if the mayor is the one that actually has that line of responsibility as the administrator of the city, then the mayor has to do that. And if it's not, if it comes back to this body, that this body assumes a certain level of responsibility when it comes to dealing with that office. And that's why I contacted our great lawyer here, our aide, to provide us with some guidelines and some ideas and some thoughts on how to go about getting some of these things done. And we felt that it was important for us to establish, if you agree, an ad hoc committee of this body to move forward and start that process, so that we can kind of take away some of these questions that we've all have had in the past in terms of who does what and where and why. One of the functions of the clerk is actually to be the clerk of the city council. So how does that actually apply when it comes to us operating here? And exactly, we don't have the staff that some of these other bodies have in the state. We rely heavily on the clerk's office to help us out, but yet we have run into some issues where things aren't done basically the way they should be done because we don't have that support, at least not a clear line of support. So I think it's important for us to remedy this situation, and as we move forward with the next line of what's to come down the line and stuff, I think it's important for us to kind of set the record straight and go from a clean slate in the sense to move us forward as a body. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Thanks, and I'll just add, I think an ad hoc committee it's a great opportunity right now for the city to kind of advise me what you want to see for changes. So your ordinance does provide that your legislative council can make suggestions for ordinance changes to propose. So I thought that this would be a great way to kind of handle that, so that you could make your changes, and what you would see would come out of this committee would be ordinance changes, proposals that we would draft up that would then get vetted by the full city council. It's not that the ad hoc committee would have any legislative or executive powers that you don't have as a body. It's more just to allow me to get some input and then be able to come back to you with some suggestions based off of what you see as your needs and where you want this council to move forward. just as an example, your clerk of council is not defined in your ordinance, but there is an operation within this chambers that the clerk provides for you, and it is a budget matter as well. So you do have an opportunity to really expand that and advocate your needs and wants on positions of that nature.
All right. Councilor Cardozo?
So Shannon, can you, Attorney Resnick, can you clarify, the position, the clerk's position and the assistant clerk's position? Those two positions are positions that are approved by the council, right? They're appointed positions. Does the mayor appoint the clerk? Who appoints the clerk?
This body does. You confirm, you appoint and confirm a city clerk. Yeah, I think it's every 3 years. An assistant city clerk is appointed by the clerk.
Okay.
And then confirmed by this body.
So Councilor Cruz, who has stepped into the assistant city clerk position, that still has to come in front of this body, correct?
No.
I can't speak on that because I don't have any order of the court, or of this council that has happened.
Okay, so in section 2-171, it says there shall be an assistant city clerk for the city. The assistant city clerk shall be nominated by the city clerk to the city council and confirmed by the council. So
I'll answer your question very generally as to what your ordinance says. So that's exactly what I mean. So appointed, nominated by the city clerk, and then confirmed by this body. A lot of your ordinances will speak of whether or not it's just a straight appointment that comes out of the mayor's office, or an appointment with confirmation. This is one unique position that has been funded in your budget for many years, just has never been filled. It's an appointment by nomination, appointment by the clerk, and then confirmed by the council.
So hopefully we will see that happen. And so with the clerk position, the official clerk position, the same scenario. So how does that process work? Do folks on this council, throw names in the hat? How does that process work?
No.
Oh.
Do you want me to help you?
Well,
no, I'm asking our council attorney.
It's very simple. The clerk's position is up every 3 years. It usually happens from November, December. And at that point in time, the clerk is, Mr. Zioli's been here for 30-some-odd years, so he gets appointed at that particular time by a nomination of the city council for the second, and then you vote for his position, which goes for another 3. It's a 3-year term is what it is, how the city clerk's position works.
Right, but if somebody else wanted to be considered, how does that happen?
That's up to this body to make an appointment or a nomination.
We can go back to John J. Lyons and Celestino Petty back into the 70s and 80s, and that was an interesting scenario then with city council, because the city council then did not want Mr. Lyons. So it became a shooting match, but it went through court, and Mr. Lyons did still stay within the position because it's a longer, there was a court case. But somebody can, Councilor Cardoza, I can just say, somebody can be, rightfully so.
Okay, because in some cities, it's a whole election process, and the citizens elect their clerk, and it's a very important position, and we're now in 2021, we're not back in 78, so I would love to see more folks throw their names in the hat, and I would love to see a process where we can vet other people.
That's your discretion as a council.
Right. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I liked your answer.
Thank you.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we can all agree over the past year through this pandemic, our reliance on the clerk's office grew, and we found that there was a lot of confusion arose as to who the clerk works for, or some of those questions arose. So I think it's a good idea for us as a council to really develop what responsibilities city clerk, assistant clerk, clerk of the council shall have. Also even potentially the legislative council as well. So a couple questions regarding the ad hoc committee. If we approve this resolution today, the president, do you appoint members to this committee? How many members of the committee? Would that be all at your discretion, or how does that go about?
If this receives a favorable recommendation, it would go to the council on Monday. If the council passes it, then by Tuesday, I would start thinking about who would be appropriate for the ad hoc committee. There is one question that I would have to pose to Legislative Counsel, and that is, assuming we only had 4 members and not 5, because
And you're not subject to open meeting.
you're not subject to open meeting law.
Correct. As long as there's not a quorum of this council, we don't have to, open meeting law does not apply. That does not mean that you should not be open and transparent of our process. We can certainly come out with a report that we provide to the ordinance committee that reflects the discussions and recommendations. But it doesn't need to be a formal meeting posting and all of that. So my recommendation to help me do my job would be to not have a quorum.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that all of this information will get presented to your ordinance committee, your full city council will see all of the work of your ad hoc committee. It's just, I think the ordinance is interesting that it permits your legislative council to suggest ordinances, but that really should come from you. So it's easier for me if I have a team of people letting me know what the ideas are, we draft it all up, and then it's ready to go to ordinance. And then if you're not on the committee, you always have the opportunity to speak on the item at ordinance or at full city council.
So you're kind of leading me into my next question regarding, so the recommendations of this committee would then be turned into an ordinance, ultimately an ordinance. So there's no current ordinance which lays any of this description out?
No, there are. So your assistant city clerk does have it. The thing that I think is interesting about the assistant city clerk position, it's never been filled. So it would be good to take some time to see what really are the needs, what are the operations of that position going to be, to have that in. We might just be playing a guessing game. We might also look at what other cities do for their assistant city clerk. The city clerk does have designations in state statutes and in your own ordinances, so we can blend that together, see if we have an opportunity to expand or define it a little bit more clearly. The clerk of the council is not defined in your ordinances. So that is one of the things that I mentioned to Councilor Rodriguez would be a great opportunity to add as an ordinance. Just so it's clear, like, especially when new councilors come in and they have questions, that you can just direct them right to the ordinance and it's in writing. It's a good opportunity for this to happen.
Great. And then also kind of piggybacking on Councilor Cardoso's comments. So when and this is, I guess, at this point, all assumption, right? But say the clerk's position in the future opens up. What is the hiring process? You said that it's through this committee. So we appoint or nominate somebody.
Yep.
And maybe, Sandra, you could help us with this. Would a position be posted? Would we go through normal hiring practices to see who is eligible, who's interested in the job? We then take that list, look through it, and then nominate, vote for nominations or something to that effect. So would the city's Human Resources Department help us out in that process?
Yep. I think I would recommend that we help you through that process. I took some comps and stuff that I can share with whoever, Mr. Chairman, if you convene a committee, I can get all that information for you. But to ensure a little transparency, yes, I think that we should post it with the city. Anyone can have access to review resumes at any time, so that way you can stay consistent and stuff like that. So, and depending, how long you want it open, let's say if you want it open for 30 days or open until filled, you can give first consideration within a week and a half after posting the position. You know what I mean? So it's all about how you want this to go.
And would this ad hoc committee or through this council, are we the ones who are going to develop the qualifications for the clerk's position and then put those qualifications to you, Sandra, and then that's what you post? I mean, is that what this process is going to entail?
What I would recommend is that I'll give you some comps from other municipalities along with salary ranges. I'll give you surveys or, from FY 1920 in current fiscal year. And then that way you'll have all that information. You can put it together on how you feel that you want that job description to be aligned, as well as the salary.
Now, currently, is the city clerk a residency requirement position?
I have no idea.
Do we know?
It does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you have to live in the city.
It would have to be.
Okay.
The assistant clerk, too. They're covered by Section 2-110.
They'd have to be.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Sandra.
I just, if I might, and I don't disagree with perhaps that you should, I just want to make it clear that your ordinances does not require a hiring process. So like it's very similar to when the mayor makes his appointments. That falls in their authority. So I just want you to know that you have that opportunity to just make a nomination amongst yourself. It's your right as a body to see how you want to proceed. If someone asked me that, do we have to do that? My answer is going to say no. It's a nomination. It's treated like an appointment. It's very similar what happens when you have a new mayor that comes in and makes those appointments. So just in full transparency to this body, I wanted that information to be known.
We're not required, but we can if we so choose.
Exactly.
And anyone else before I go back to Councilor Cardozo, Councilor Azak?
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Resnick. So I think this is a great idea, and this is a great time to do this because of this transition. I think this is the time that we can, as a council, work together really to clarify things. And this isn't anybody's, this is just, it's been going on for so long that I think, there are things that are missing in our ordinances, and this is one of them. We really need to take this opportunity to think this out, really make sure it's clear and an ordinance that's going to stick through to the future. Because we don't realize how important this office is. Yes, the clerk works for the city council, but there's also a clerk's office that runs many functions in City Hall. And that office follows state law. I think they follow a lot of guidelines, not just our ordinances, but as well as state law. So we need to make sure that we're doing, we're creating this ordinance and thinking ahead for the right individuals that are going to be going into these positions, and to be able to work well with everybody, with the administration as well as the council. So this office covers a lot of different aspects of city government, and that's why I think it's very important, and I just want to reinforce this is a really good time to do this. And I believe I think our clerk now, his input his experiences will be taken into consideration as well, to make sure that we're making the right job description. So I think this is great. So thank you. Thank you, Attorney.
Councilor Cardozo?
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can I just ask, do we have to change any of our ordinances if we were to put together a job description and put it through HR at all?
That's the will of this body. I mean, if you want to require it, you could make an ordinance proposal, but to be fair in envisioning what that timeline looks like, you might not make an ordinance deadline by then to just get it passed through this body. But you can. I guess you could.
Okay. And then with the assistant clerk position, the same thing. Could we?
That's definitely an ordinance position, as opposed to like a charter change. So yes, you could do that as well. But you could also just use the practices of your HR and proceed. I'm not saying you cannot follow an interview process. I'm just want it to be very clear. It's a nomination. At any time, this council could make it a nomination, and don't want anyone to be surprised by that information.
Right. Well, with a nomination, there's some, there's good and bad, because how do you then identify people who are interested in the position, with the nomination? So if you have something that you're posting, you'd identify people that are, one, qualified and interested.
That's your voting privilege, and that's what I'm trying to reinforce. Whatever your comfort is as a voting member of the council.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Clerk.
Just a point of information, though, the council can establish a lot by formal order, however. For example,
yes,
you don't need to go through the entire ordinance process to adopt an order as to a job description and requirements. And in answer to Councilor Thompson, I actually saw this ad hoc committee also including the process that you would follow for these positions, because I don't think it's ever been done before. And this really is a timely way of handling something. Frankly, I think every department head should have a process for filling and also a annual performance review, if you will. The school superintendent is the only person I know of in this city who has an annual performance review by the school committee, and that's, I think Councilor Stewart tried that some years ago, and it was not adopted. So
We can definitely figure something like that out with the ad hoc committee to have some sort of order presented that would direct the HR department to take action on your behalf for posting. That's certainly within the ad hoc committee's purview.
And to the ad hoc committee, whoever it is, once this passes, the other thing the clerk does is completely set up Inauguration Day. That is no small feat. So whoever occupies that position had really better know what they're doing and how to do it, not only in advance, but on the day of. And so it's a very intricate position. It's kind of an interesting position in city government, but I apologize for speaking too much. Is there a motion to recommend favorably?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I can, just...
Yes, Councilor Rodriguez.
Well, I just want to, ask my colleagues here to look at this. We are a city of 100,000 plus people. I still believe we're way over 100,000 plus people. One of the more important positions in city government to me is the clerk of the city, because that person is also the clerk of this body and the clerk of the city. And yet, in 2021, we have no job description for the city clerk. I just had a conversation with our HR director, and every single department head in this building has a job description except the city clerk. How do we explain the fact that we are a city that actually has moved into the 20th century, never mind the 21st century, but yet we are operating as if we were back in the 1800s? And I think it's, it doesn't matter how you feel about a person one way or the other. This has nothing to do with the personalities. It has to do with the job that we are elected to do, and that's to basically set this city in the path to succeed, so we don't run into situations where things seem like we're just rubber stamping things. And I think as far as transparency is concerned, I think we owe it to the taxpayers of the city to at least do the minimum amount of work that we need to do to put some things in the books so that it looks like to those that come after us that we did what we were supposed to do. And that's the reason why I sponsored this. I thought of the resolve that it was a necessary thing for us to do in this time. And I hope that you will support it, and we can move this thing forward, because I think the city deserves a lot more than we have given it to it in the past. So with that, if there's not anything else from my colleagues, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend this favorably to the City Council.
Second.
All right, motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. If there is no further comment, would the clerk please call the roll?
Azak?
Yes.
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
10 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. We have now reached the end of the agenda. I know Councilor Azak and Councilor Nicastro have items. Councilor Azak.
A moment of council's recognition, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to remind everybody at home that Brockton Cultural Council will be meeting this Thursday, April 9th, from 6 to 7 p.m. at the North Baptist Church, which is located at 899 North Main Street. And this meeting is for the planning of the 50th anniversary of Summerfest, which is this year, 2021. All interested parties are welcome. It's going to be a wonderful event, and I know Mr. Bill Hogan is organizing this Summerfest this year, so we're hoping that everybody that wants to be a part of this, from the past to the future, to please join us at this meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. I just want to let the public know, and all my colleagues, that the Public Safety Committee meeting will be meeting this Wednesday, April 7th at 6:30. And the meeting will be held here in Council Chambers, and it will be closed to the public, but interested parties may view it on youtube.com, and I think it may also be broadcast on one of our cable access channels. There are 3 items to be heard. All very interesting topics. I would welcome people to watch. So that's the first thing. And then I have 2 counselor recognitions. And the first one is, I was busy yesterday making an Easter celebration for my family, so I didn't read the Sunday Boston Globe until today. And this section, Sunday Arts, includes the announcement of this year's Massachusetts Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. And I was thrilled to see that 2 Brockton High School students received art awards. They are Olivia Pinney and Isabella Stacco. They received honorable mentions. This is a really big deal. I'm very proud of both of them, and I want to congratulate them. This is a wonderful thing, and hopefully we'll see even more Brockton High students on the list next year. That's my second item. And my third item is this local publication, Edible South Shore and South Coast, has a distribution of more than 15,000 people in our part of Massachusetts. And I just want to give a shout out to Brockton resident Cynthia Hodges, because she is featured in this month's edition with her cafe, Lady C&J. She is a hard-working member of our community and makes delicious food, and so I make a shout-out for her. This is wonderful news. I'm thrilled for her as a Brockton business owner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Lally, and then Councilor Ianieri.
Thank
And
you,
then
Mr.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to announce to my colleagues and the folks at home that the Standing Committee on Real Estate will be meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, April 5th at 5 p.m. Is it the 5th? I might have messed that up. Yeah, the 6th, sorry. Long day. Tuesday, April 6th at 5 p.m. It will be on Zoom, and so you can view that on YouTube or Brockton Cable Access. Just have 2 quick items. Shouldn't take long, but that's Tuesday the 6th at 5 p.m. on Zoom. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Councilor Ianieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stand because I'm getting a little dizzy looking through this glass, to be truthful with you. But anyhow, ordinance committee members, as you know, there's been a change there since the vacancy of Ward 1 member. I have returned to the ordinance committee, and I will chair with Councilors Monahan, Castro, and Rodriguez and Thompson. I do want to talk to our legal counsel before she leaves tonight, because I know there's some items in the folder. So next Monday, when we come into council, I should be able to talk to people about a couple of dates so we can meet, and we will be having our meetings right back here in the council chambers. So I just want to let you know that. So next Monday, I will bring that to your attention. Just the other thing I just wanted to mention, we haven't been in the council chambers for some time, and you know, when we were sworn in January of 2020, at that particular time, the clerk and I, when we were running the program, we acknowledged the fact that you know, there are new portraits on the wall with mayors that served from 20, 25 years, starting with Mayor Fowle and going to Mayor Units and to Mayor, I think that's Mayor Harrington down there, and Mayor Linda Belzotti. And if you look just one over, we have a new one. The city clerk got that done in a timely fashion because he wanted to for the family asking that they would. And we have over there the late Mayor Bill Carpenter is joining the wall. So it's not sometimes too often when you have that type of a situation the way that he passed, but the clerk wanted to get that done. So I just wanted to let you people know that you know, he's hanging in here with all the other mayors that have served the city and have served it well. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me, Mr. President or Mr. Chairman today. I just want to make a quick announcement regarding the ongoing battle against COVID-19. The Veterans Administration is holding 2 COVID-19 veteran vaccination clinics here in Brockton. What's special about these vaccination clinics is, number one, for veterans, they're open to all veterans of all ages, and they've now included the spouses of veterans, so that will be another category of people that can get vaccinated. One is being held Wednesday, April 7th, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Mount Moriah Baptist Church on 24 Pleasant Street in Brockton. There'll be a second clinic on Thursday and Friday, April 8th and 9th, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., and that's going to be at the VFW Post 1046 at 283 North Quincy Street. I want to make this information available to all veterans, and I encourage all veterans and now their spouses to get vaccinated. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Razak again.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a correction to my announcement. It's Thursday, April 8th, not 9th, for the Summerfest, Cultural Council Summerfest meeting. I apologize. Thank you.
All right, councilors, I need to talk marijuana. I assume that'll get your attention sufficiently. We have pending applications, and it's my intention to hold a special council meeting to deal with that particular issue and all of those applications. I don't want it muddled into a regular city council agenda. So I will be conferring with legislative council tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest. There will be a publication in the newspaper. There will be a publication on the city website. Everyone will know exactly when that meeting is going to be held. Everyone will be told that they need to have their complete applications. If they are not already submitted, because I don't want any past ministerial or other errors in this process. So I apologize for having to hold a special meeting, but I really do not believe that we can give justice to the remaining applicants by commingling it with a regular council meeting. And as soon as I find out availability of legislative council, I'll try to get to you with the date of that special council meeting. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for being very well prepared tonight. I think this was a very productive meeting. I think it is nice to be back here, and we're adjourned.
Amen.
I think it's the wood. It's kind of a cheap block. Good night. I think maybe this is hollow.